Today, we're diving into a story of incredible transformation, one that goes back thousands of years to ancient India. We're talking about the Vedic Age, a period that didn't just slowly evolve, it was totally turned upside down. Let's get right into it. All right, so take a look at this. What you're seeing here is pretty much the entire story in a single snapshot. On one side, you have this world of democratic tribes, really flexible social roles, and an economy built completely around cattle. And on the other, a world of powerful kings, a super rigid social hierarchy, and an economy built on land. The big question is, how did one become the other? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out. So just to set the stage, we're looking at a huge chunk of time, 1,000 years, from about 1500 to 500 BC. And this whole period is neatly split into two very different halves, the early Vedic phase and the later Vedic phase. That pivot point, right around 1000 BC, well, that's when everything started to change.
To really get this story, we first got to meet the people who lived it. The Vedic Age kicks off with a migration of Indo-European speakers, often called the Aryans. Now, these folks were nomadic pastoralists, moving from Central Asia right into the northern Indian subcontinent, and they brought their language, their culture, and their whole way of life with them.
I want you to just picture this for a second. These early communities were always, and I mean always, on the move. They were tribal, right? So they had no real concept of a fixed kingdom or owning territory. Their whole existence was fluid, centered around their herds of animals and their clans, not on land or borders.
Okay, so let's zoom in and get a little more specific about what this early society was actually like. It was a world that honestly operated on a completely different set of rules than the one that came after it. Now, this is fascinating. Look at this word, gavishti. This one word tells you everything you need to know about what was important to them. The literal Sanskrit word for war was a search for cows. I mean, wow. That just shows you how absolutely central cattle were to their survival, their wealth, and their power. And this really gets to the core of their economic reality. See, land didn't have much value because, they were always moving. Your status, your influence, your entire net worth was counted in how many cows you had. It wasn't about real estate, it was all about the livestock. So how did they govern themselves? Well, you might be surprised to hear it was pretty democratic. The chief, or Rajan, wasn't a king like we imagine one today. He was actually chosen by the people in a tribal assembly called the Samiti. And his position? It wasn't passed down to his son. It wasn't hereditary. And this is critical. These assemblies were really inclusive. Even women got to attend and have a say in the big decisions.
And their social world was just as fluid. So yeah, there was an early version of the Varna, or class system, but it was all based on what you did, not who your parents were. So a warrior's kid could decide to become a priest, and a priest's kid could become an artisan. You could actually move up or down the social ladder. Okay, so we've got this picture of a mobile, pastoral, and fairly egalitarian society. But then, around 1000 BC, something big happens. A single catalyst that kicks off this massive chain reaction, changing literally every part of their lives. I mean, really think about it. What could possibly be so powerful that it would make a society of nomads just stop, settle down, tear up their political rulebook, and lock their society into a rigid hierarchy? What could do that?
And here's the answer. It all came down to a single, game-changing innovation, agriculture. The entire society pivoted from an economy based on herding cattle to one based on farming the land. This one change was the domino that knocked over all the others.
So let's see exactly how this one shift completely rebuilt their world. Welcome to the later Vedic phase. It's a society that is, in so many ways, the polar opposite of what came before. Okay, so this is the first major consequence. Once you start farming, you can't be a nomad anymore, right? You have to stay put and take care of your crops. This leads to permanent villages, and once you have villages, you suddenly have something new and incredibly valuable to protect: territory. Land becomes the new form of wealth.
And of course, protecting territory changes politics completely. The Rajan is no longer an elected chief. He becomes a hereditary king, whose main job is to rule and defend the land. Power starts to consolidate. And those democratic tribal assemblies, their influence just fades away. And with this shift, women are no longer allowed to participate. A standing army becomes a necessity to defend the kingdom's new borders.
The social structure also transforms. It hardens into this formal, four-level hierarchy. At the very top, you've got the Brahmins, the priests and teachers. Right below them, the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers.
Then come the Vaisyas, the producers, the farmers, the merchants. And at the very bottom are the Shudras, whose role was to serve the other three classes.
And here it is. This is probably the most profound social change of all. This new system wasn't flexible anymore. It was fixed by birth. Whatever class you were born into, that's where you stayed for life. And so did your kids and their kids. That social mobility from the early phase, completely gone.
So, a nomadic tribe becomes a settled kingdom. A flexible society becomes a rigid one. Why is this ancient transition so important for us to understand today? What's the big takeaway?
Let's just put it all together side by side. You go from a tribal democracy to a hereditary kingdom, from a cattle-based economy to an agriculture-based one, from a flexible society based on your job to a rigid one based on your birth. Even the role of women changed dramatically. Every single pillar of their society was rebuilt from the ground up. It's just a remarkable case study in how one economic shift can reshape an entire civilization.
And here's the crucial takeaway. The world that emerged in this later Vedic period, it didn't just vanish. It actually set the stage for everything that came next. The great kingdoms of ancient India, the complex social dynamics, and many of the philosophical traditions all have their roots right here, in this one pivotal transformation.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. This shift to a social ladder fixed by birth, something that started thousands of years ago, became one of the most enduring and, let's be honest, controversial ideas in history. It really makes you wonder, how do the echoes of these ancient changes still resonate in our world right now?